So it's a big welcome from me. I'm Jenny Campbell. I am Chief Exec of the Resilience Dynamic, founder, researcher, kind of generally a bit of a resilience nutter. Kind of if you cut it, you cut me in two, I'd have the rings of resilience in me. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you and to anyone who is watching this recording and interested in becoming part of our community of practice. Via the Resilience Accreditation Programme. So, and with me today I have Rebecca and Christina. Do you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi everybody. It's really good to see you all. So I'm Rebecca. I'm lucky enough to be part of the faculty, and so I'm a leadership coach working with individuals, with teams, with organisations, and I will let Christina talk about the impact on her coaching and her practice. But for me personally, I think when you see the resilience work, it's really difficult to unsee it. So it's had a huge impact on, I think, both myself as a practitioner, as a coach, but also all my client work as well. So yeah, when Jenny asked me to do this, to join the faculty, which is a complete joy. I love it. I'm in the middle of marking essays at the moment. I didn't have to think twice, and it's just shone such a different lens for me on my coaching practice. So yeah, I'm a big believer in the work, both from a sort of research perspective, but also from a practical implementation. How can I use this with my clients immediately, which is just fabulous. So yeah, it's really good to be with you all today, and hopefully I'll get to work with some of you next year.
Hello everyone, my name's Christina. I am a coach and I also do training mainly at this point in time for about the past 10 years in the charitable sector. So I work generally with large fundraising teams, and I I joined the Resilience Dynamic, I trained in about, I think it was 2021 actually, I think it was after COVID. So yeah, and I'll get to talk to you a little bit later on about how how it impacted me and how I use that with my clients, both my coaching clients and also with the teams that I work with. So yeah, I look forward to talking to you later.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to throw up some slides and you'll see our agenda. So hoping everybody will be able to see these okay. If my computer will play ball. And excuse me a minute, I've just got to do this one thing so that I can actually see you on the same screen. So it's a big welcome, and you've heard from us just a little bit. We're such a small crew today that I think actually, just come in if you've got questions. If you've got questions, and we're kind of mid-sentence or mid-flow, feel free to put them in the chat. The purpose of this is just to really be in your service, tell you a little bit about us and what we do and what resilience is about and the research, but then especially to go into the programme itself, the nuts and bolts of all of that, and actually what's the so what of it, why would you be interested in doing it. So if you have questions, feel free to just come in. If we're mid-flow, just jot them down in chat and we'll make sure that we've got Q&A at the end. So that's our agenda. That's what we're thinking about. Is I'm going to kind of just explain a little bit about who we are and a little bit about some of our research insights and impact, if you like, about why resilience. Rebecca will take you through the actual programme, and Christina will reveal all and what's the so what. And we've got Q&A there, but as I say, let's just take questions as we go. So I hope that's what you've signed up for. You're in the right Zoom meeting this morning. So a big welcome. And we will be sending a recording out to everybody who is here and also who signed up for it. So and do feel free to get in touch post the event if you have any further questions about the programme itself. So who we are, I mean, this is one of the pillars of who we are. We're based on many, many, many years of research. So I kicked off the research in 2007. And I think what really I was curious about at the time was two things. Number one is, how was it I became so much more flexible when I had children? And how did that relate to my confidence, right? So it was quite a personal inquiry initially. And then when I was thinking about it, and as the research sort of initially developed, it was so much about how is it that people can, the same event can affect people in such different ways? What is actually going on there? And we are talking about in the back end of the 2000s, 2000s, and it was mental health wasn't so understood then. It wasn't talked about then. It was very much more a clinical sort of problem, if you had a problem. So the parlance, the usual sort of way of speaking about that, it wasn't included. Why we would actually respond in particular ways and not. Yes, you could go to a leadership program and do something about that, but actually, really, how did we actually adapt successfully? So I set about that research program, and then since then we've become kind of pretty solid in our research capability. So we do both qualitative research and quantitative research. So we produce data papers. So if you're really interested in actually learning a bit more about the macro picture, what's going on, we use our self-assessment tools for some of the quantitative data there, and we do quite a lot of analysis on that. So we've been tracking resilience pre-COVID, and there's some really interesting insights as a result. So I think research is absolutely part and parcel of what we do, and of course as an accredited practitioner you you tap into that, and in fact you are equipped and accredited in the main resilience models that we'll go into in a minute. So that's our research. And I just really, maybe not in chat, but maybe just all together, what does resilience mean to you guys? Get the juices flowing straight off the bat.
For me, it's being able to handle is the right word, but let's say handle anyway, whatever life throws at me, really.
Yeah. So responding well or whatever, managing, coping, that sort of thing. Yeah. I don't get anything different or similar.
I think for me it's about, oh sorry, Barbara.
No, go for it. I think you were first.
Okay. It's that ability to bounce back. I always think of resilience as being a bit like a ball, and it's sort of like, so you can bounce, but if the ball gets really wet, then it doesn't bounce quite as high.
Doggy balls.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Barbara?
I was, just to add to what's been said, for me, it's also something around the person having a sense of control over their environment, whatever is causing that. I'm going to say stress, but maybe that's a value-laden term, isn't it? But yeah, so it's personal sense of control.
Interesting. Sheena, do you have anything different, or are you just sort of curious about?
I think I would agree with what everybody's said. I don't know if I could think of anything that I would add to that, maybe other than just finding a way through difficulties to so that they don't completely overwhelm you.
And part of the our tradition, if you like, in thinking about resilience either comes, the original research either comes from clinical research, in fact, which is trauma. It was trauma related. So in fact, it wasn't actually sort of part and parcel of the day-to-day workplace, if you like. At the clinical work, it actually was, on the more extreme end of where resilience is really under threat, if you like. And then you get the physics sort of aspects of material science, where it is about, Rachel, that kind of ability to be able to reshape itself into recover its own shape, which is from material science. Our research, and it was a surprise for me, shows this. So it's about adaptability, and the measure of your resilience is your capacity for change. So, Shane, if you're thinking about CrossReach and 1,700 people, actually your collective resilience is going to indicate whether you can absorb change, whether you can initiate change successfully, whether you can pivot without losing your fundamental integrity of who you are and what you're about, right? And actually so it includes coping, it includes bouncing back, but this takes it to a different kind of dimension, if you like, you know, and it's pretty strategic. So it's strategic for leaders, it's strategic for us as individual humans, you know, with all the stuff that gets thrown at us, but also in day-to-day normal life. You know, actually, instead of it just being a response to, it can actually also be very much about forward. Am I creating the capability, capacity to be able to adapt to where I want to go? You know, and can I count on that? So we chew this a lot in the accreditation programme. We chew it with clients, we chew the sort of myths around it, we chew it. You know, we really discuss this in quite a sort of in-depth aspect, because actually, what does adaptation mean? What does adaptability mean? What does capacity mean, etc. But I hope that's already kind of giving, you know, a bit of an insight into, it includes those things, includes, you know, there's a range of resilience levels, but actually it's strategic. And so if we want to actually be able to adapt well, we've got to foster this capability. And that's what coaches can really help in their clients. So that's definition. This is what we're about. We believe in healthy, high performance for everyone. So resilience actually leads to, if you like, that higher success. It can be in personal life. It could be me playing tennis, you know, I'm better if I'm more resilient. It can be about work and productivity, etc. So any way in which you want to see that. And actually, we just know it's learnable. It's a learnable trait, right? So it's actually that's really important, okay? And so part of the coach's job is to enable that learning and to help the client foster the conditions for that learning. So yeah, so we're very much about people, and what we do is three things. We coach. So already you've heard Rebecca and Christina talking about that, coaching individuals, teams, and there's a number of us who are involved who coach whole systems, you know, multiple teams, multi-team aspect, the sort of thing that Peter Hawkins is currently discussing. We train, and that's really to build capacity. So the accreditation programme is a training programme, and we have a couple of others in there. And then the last thing is a relatively new, which Marcella knows all about because has helped us develop this, is we're about data. So what we mean by that is most people don't, you know, they think it's impossible to measure resilience, it's too complicated, or it's too clinically oriented, or whatever, or they want to peg their workforce and say, where are we? And what we've done is develop a set of tools, self-assessment tools and tracking tools that let people see the range in which they operate, and actually their opportunities for understanding more and then optimizing where they come from. And the reason for that is because once people really see the truth of where they're currently at, it's far, far, far more effective about therefore what they need. Right? And so it isn't an idealistic thing, and nor is it emotionally kind of complicated. It's just really knowing where you're at right now, and therefore how to boost your resilience, which then unlocks these other things. So that's our data dashboard. It's called the Resilience Dynamic Dashboard, and our practitioners, once they're accredited, all get to sort of call off against that on behalf of their clients. So that's who we are, and we're a bunch of really, I'm nutter number one, but there are lots of others who follow me, and yeah, and the book. I think some people who were coming into this have read the book and are curious as a result of that. So, it becomes a little bit of a Bible for all of us about how to coach and some tools, if you like, for our clients. So, a really, really strong and dynamic community. We're just shy of 100 odd people, and we meet really regularly to share best practice, to kind of peer supervise, to lean into kind of complicated subjects. In COVID, we were doing that really, really regularly, and we've continued that, whether it's the EDI agenda, diversity, whether it's teams, whether it's burnout, and we're sort of always curious about that. So we're doing that informally and formally through CPD and our conferences. These are taken from our conferences, so quite fun photos. So that's who we are. Why do you think it's important? Anyone? I mean, especially nowadays.
From an organizational perspective, organizations are dynamic. And the organization that I work for is going through systemic change. And that's one of the reasons that I'm particularly interested, not just on a sort of a one-on-one basis, but also thinking through how could I potentially scale that up to be more an organizational wide solution to address this issue.
Oh, that's really interesting, Barbara.
I think as well what you touched on earlier is that trauma is that there's understanding trauma, we're constantly receiving vicarious trauma, and sometimes we don't recognize it as trauma, and we think again that as a clinical thing. But yeah, just on a day-to-day basis, we're taking it on. So there's something about how do we manage that.
That's interesting. It's far more complicated. All the sort of stuff happening outside our world that affects us all, doesn't it? It really does, yeah. I mean, overall, we see this complexity, and it's very, very hard to simplify. And it's very hard. I mean, there's sort of sudden issues that happen in the world that affect so much. I mean, supply chain, if you're in the food manufacturing, and the Ukrainian wheat aspects and sriracha sauce, and you've got sort of sudden tax changes coming in, and your organizations maybe having to legislation, and then there's this kind of really complicated things like sustainability, etc. These are AI, huge things going on, and at the same time, for example, multi-generational workforces. I don't know whether cross-reach, Barbara, 5 generations. So different, you've got a Gen Alpha, Gen Zs coming in with people who have not yet retired and are in their 60s and even going to 70s, and it's completely different. And we find the impact of that is basically a lot of people just get stuck. A lot of organizations get stuck. They find it really, really difficult to move and to shift and to change. So despite the environment being dynamic, it's creating a stuckness. It's almost sort of the opposite effect. And then because of that, people are just on their knees. So this has been rising for a lot. So our stats from 2023, there's a data paper around it. If you're thinking about a business case for this across the board, just lean on our data papers, but your burnout is around about 50% of the population, working population, have experienced some kind of level of burnout. And that is much, much higher with Gen Zs and Gen Alpha and millennials. So, there's a real fatigue in trying to actually navigate this stuff. And that's actually, I think, what you can count on by coming out here. You will have much better sense of why people are finding things difficult, how they view things, and actually if they got the resilience to match the situation that they're in. And that's a core part of what you get as a resilience practitioner. So yeah, so we're very much in this world, and it's because, you know, we are operating where demand versus capacity is highly variable. So the demand upon us, what you see on the right-hand side, is up and down. The demand, you know, our capacity to respond to that may actually not match it. And therefore there may be a deficit, or it may be just very, very unexpected and moving all the time. So what do you have to do? And if you foster more of that resilience capacity, you can actually respond much more proactively rather than reactively. So that's what sort of really the heart of what a resilience practitioner would be doing on behalf of their organisation, a client, one-to-one team, or whatever. From our tracker results in 2022, and Marcella, you've seen this before, this was shocking. So if the demand is over the capacity, people's energy drops, stress goes up. If they're, and this is self-reported, so their sense of demand is over their sense of being able to deal with it, it has a massive effect. And it's negative, it's a negative effect. And it's directly going to affect productivity. And the very first sign of that is it's going to affect well-being, you know, so people will drop in their well-being and self-care. So, you know, this stuff is important. And, you know, it's partly to stem the tide of a sort of move towards difficulties in mental health, but it's also to unlock, you know, the capacity for more innovation, etc. So, and this last thing, just to kind of give you a bit of a flavour, is we've done quite a lot of research around organisational resilience and the reliance and interconnection with teams. And we know that teams, resilient teams, foster what we call organisational resilience assets. So these are things that actually are leverageable. There are things that people can trade on, that are processes, people, teams, etc., that actually boost that overall adaptability. And resilient teams foster them, and unresilient teams destroy them. Da, da, da. So, you know, watch this space for more about that. So I hope that's given you a flavour of why we are, you know, think it's really important. You may have questions about that, or it might just be sort of beginning to you know, kind of percolate in there. I'm going to just go in a little bit into actually what a dynamic coach is, and you know what you're doing, and then a little bit about the models, and then I'm going to pass into Rebecca to explain more of the programme. So do feel free to sort of pop any questions that you've got so far. So as a coach, I mean, number one priority for us is you work ethically. The ethics within this programme is really strong. So, and here you're talking about actually being really clear on what is necessary for a client depending upon the resilience level, and where it's, for example, not appropriate that you as a practitioner are the one who helps them. You know, Barbara, straight off, you're working systemically. You know, so you're aware it is an integrative sort of capability. You know, so many things come into resilience, but actually being able to understand that demand and capacity side. And because of those two things, you're working very much around pacing the work for success. So if you take a newbie coach who might just say, well, what are your goals? Let's start working on your goals, and get into that kind of, you know, rather simplistic way sometimes that we can find. You know, many times you don't achieve the goals, the client doesn't have capacity for the goals aren't well thought out, da 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 da, right? And actually, really at the end of the day, what resilience does, and I think Rebecca was saying this, is once you see it, you can't unsee it, is it infects every part of your practice as a sort of underlying, you know, underpinning verification that the client has appropriate capacity for what the work is in coaching. So, you know, it's really going to affect a lot. you're working with groups and teams, you have to do that as part of the programme. And, you know, it's about enabling resilience in those individuals, but also across the dynamics of the team. And you have to take care of your own resilience. Internal practitioners also may be creating different kind of ways in which the organisation can access those resources, whether it's online or whether it's through workshops or whatever. Often there's policies being actually created, and that includes, of course, leadership team commitment, etc. And then they become maybe a kind of driver for reasons for change or reasons to embed more of this stuff in order to be able to, you know, Barbara, you were talking about it, being able to respond properly, you know, to the dynamics that are around you. So, and there's a number, about a third of our community are internal practitioners, and they do help one another in a slightly different way. So that's quite cool. And then sometimes you've got an internal and external working together, and that's very cool as well. And so you get both sides. So that's what I think a coach does, over and above kind of, I would say, a normal executive coach. Really, really rigorous here. And how they're doing that is via these two models. So the resilience dynamic, which explains that range of resilience that I've been mentioning, and the resilience engine, which sits behind it as the kind of how to build it, which is about the nuts and bolts. And these are part of the modules of what you go into in the programme itself. So that is me, and I'm going to pass to Rebecca. As I say, you know, if you've got any questions about that kind of top line view, feel free. But over to you, Rebecca, to go through the programme.
Thank you, Jenny. It's hard to follow that one. There's so much kind of interesting stuff there that we want to kind of dig into. But I'm sure you want to hear about the actual programme itself and what you get through the programme. So the way that we learn is very, you know, Anne and I have delivered this programme together for a number of years now, and we sort of try and work to everybody's different learning styles. So it is kind of steeped in all the research and the science behind it, but we also have kind of those practical outputs. How are you really going to use this with your organizations, with your clients, with your teams? So there is the combination of the research and the science with the practical outputs through the whole of the programme from start to finish. There are 5 core modules that you will go through during the programme. So module 1, and they are all 3.5 hours long, apart from module 3, which is a shorter module. And the first one really is kind of really digging into what resilience is. You know, what are our own belief systems around resilience? Where has that been created? What are we experiencing with our own clients? And then how are we going to try and start bringing that into our own client relationships? And this is where we introduce the first of the models. So we really start to think about, okay, where is it that maybe we are at on the resilience dynamic? Where are our clients? So we really dig into that first model together. And as Jenny said, you know, this programme is as much about your clients and your organisations as it is about yourself. One of the key takeaways that I'm now reading in the essays and people are coming away from is actually the transformative effect it's had on their own personal resilience and their own well-being and their own performance, either internally or externally as a consultant. So we do kind of require self-reflection both during the modules and then between them as well. So that's module 1. And then we move into module 2, where we get the opportunity to really think about that relationship between resilience and stress and well-being. And I think one of you was talking about, you know, control and how that might show up. So what we start to look at is how do these areas really show up along that dynamic? How do we know when somebody has the capacity for their work? How is stress showing up? How does that link with well-being? So we really kind of dig into that using the resilience dynamic model as the basis for that discussion, and then bringing in your own experiences into that. So we really start to think about what are the signs and signals about where somebody is sitting alongside that, and then the relationship between resilience, stress, and well-being. Then after module 2, as you can imagine with this work, as any coach or internal practitioner will tell you, ethics is a key part of what we do anyway. But you can imagine with the resilience work, it's really important that we kind of create that safe container, both for ourselves and for our client and the organizations that we're working with. So we do quite a deep dive on ethics between modules 2 and 3, where you get given a case study in groups, there's videos, and you have to discuss those and write those up. So you really start to think about the ethics behind this work, so we can kind of bring that through the whole of the program. And then module 3 is the one where you get to ask us and quiz us about actually what do you need to do to pass the accreditation program. So it's a shorter module, but we go through, there's 9 really clear criteria, and I'll go through all the assessment process in a minute. So it's a really clear kind of nine levels of criteria that we go through. So that's module 3, where you get to just pick our brains about actually how do we pass this at the end of the program. And then module 4 is when we've introduced the second model that Jenny was just talking about, so the resilience engine. So if you think about the resilience dynamic, about being able to assess where somebody is in terms of their own personal resilience, and the resilience engine is really, where do we start the work? So what is this really about? Is it somebody that might be on kind of the whoosh of the resilience dynamic, and really this is about their own personal purpose? Where are they taking it? And you might have somebody at coping, where actually it's about their own adaptive capacity or their own internal resources, so self-belief and confidence. So really the engine, and we talk about how those 2 models integrate. They're not standalone, they really work together. So we introduce that model then in module 4. And then finally, module 5, we get to play around with some of the tools, which is a really fun module. So you'll see that some of the tools that we bring into this will be unique to the resilience dynamic, and other tools will be things that you've used within your own practice, both as L&D practitioners or coaches, and we put a resilience lens on them. So we get to try them out, we get to play around with them. And during this whole of this program, really, we have people from so many different backgrounds, which is what makes it such a rich program. So if you take this year, we've had people that are very experienced systemic team coaches through to internal L&D practitioners, and everyone brings their own experience to this. And so it really is about how are we learning together through that resilience lens through the whole of the program. So that's the kind of 5 modules. And then Jenny, if you could move us on to the next slide. So this is what you have to do as to kind of pass the program as it was. So you're expected to do some one-to-one client work. So a minimum of 4 hours, ideally with 2 different people, just because you get different experiences with people at different levels of the resilience dynamic. So you have to do 4 hours of one-to-one client case study work. That can be your own clients, it could be new clients, it could be internal people. And then group or team client work. So we say group or team because some of you will be team coaches and other people will be working with groups. So there's a minimum of 3 hours group work that you're expected to deliver as part of this program. So those are kind of resilience workshops. They might be part of a team coaching program that you're already doing, where you run a team coaching module. So that is a requirement of this program, and we help people source teams if you don't have them, or groups to work with. So the group this year was sharing work, they were co-delivering, they were bringing people into their own organization. So there's a real sense of being in this together. So we kind of support each other through that program. You also get 2 hours of individual supervision. So you can use that. Usually we start the supervision towards the end of the modules when you're actually in your client work. So you can come into myself, and there's Alison as well as those supervisors. And then we have 3 group supervisions, which are, I think, one of the sort of really rich part of the program, where you can bring kind of challenges that you're having maybe with your own practice, things that you're kind of concerned about. And we have very sort of safe group supervision to really help support that growth. And if I think back to my own program, I think it was some really challenging with care that Jenny really kind of challenged me on in that group supervision, that really unlocked something for me. So you get 3 of those from April through to June. And then we have a Slack channel or some form of channel where we can discuss, share ideas, where all the so we can, share articles, things that we've worked on, questions where we support each other. So you might be going into a program saying, help, what would you do about this? So that's a real community that is created through that. And then the actual assessment, when you're putting pen to paper, so you have to do a resilient, it's a positioning statement of up to 1,000 words. And this is really, how are you going to use this work in your own practice? So what does resilience mean to you, and how is this going to really affect change within your either organization or the clients that you're working with? Then you have to write a learning reflective essay, which is up to 2,500 words, which sounds like a lot, but actually I think the biggest challenge for people is actually editing it down. And it is a reflective essay. So it's not that we're asking for, you know, perfection within that. It's actually, what have I learned? How have I grown? What have I learned about my own resilience? And what have I noticed about the journey of my own clients through that? And then we do require just some supporting evidence from the clients that you've worked with that you have done the work. It's not, we're not requiring kind of glowing references. It is, I have done this coaching work with this particular person, just as evidence of that. So that's the program. And then the dates, just to give you an idea, this will be in the marketing materials. You can take a screen grab if you want a photograph of this, but we kick off on Tuesday, the 4th of February, and the modules run then until the beginning of April. You'll see 2 additional pieces in there. We do a Q&A session where you can quiz us about all of the licensing agreements and all of the technicalities around that. And then we have a fabulous hour-and-a-half with Jenny, where you get to quiz her about all the research, why she's done it in a certain way, why she's designed the models in a certain way. So you can really put her under the spotlight for an hour-and-a-half and really dig deep into that. And then the group supervision kicks off at the end of April, takes you through to the end of June. And then you get 2 submission dates. So either the end of June or the end of August to submit your essay and your reflective positioning statement. And really the emphasis on that is your own practice and who you are. So we often get asked, you know, can you send us an example of a really great essay that you think is fabulous? And, you know, the reason that we don't do that is because, you know, we can have systemic team coaches working with huge corporate organizations, and then we can have somebody who is a walking coach working with individuals. Now, 2 fabulously written essays, but could not be more different in their approaches and how they bring this work in. So throughout the program, what we really encourage is, how are you embodying this work? And how is this going to show up as you as a practitioner, but also how does this show up with your clients? So it's so individual. So regardless of kind of background, experience, you know, what you do currently, it's all really relevant in this program. And that's what kind of creates some of this richness through that work, I think. Oh, yes. And then what do you get? So we've talked about the confidence, actually. I've really experienced that holistic approach in a, you know, and in a challenging way. For those of you where this is important, you do get 60 hours of ICF CC EU accredited hours. So that's really important if you're doing your, you know, PPC. So that's PCC. So that's useful. And then you get a 3-year renewable license, so you can use all of the materials, so you get access to so much more. So, you know, with some programs you start and you finish and you walk away and you think, oh, I feel like I need to kind of do more. There is huge community of practice. We meet monthly, we have our conferences, people make deep friendships. I'm now collaborating and working with people that I've met through the program. So it doesn't just end at the end of June. You know, it is one of those programs where it can become part of your own professional development and your practice throughout, you know, your career, really. So yeah, it doesn't just end in June, which I think is just a really strong part of this program. So I think that's me done. I could talk about it for hours, but I won't, because Christina, that's a lot.
So I hope that's given you kind of what you were aiming for by coming in here, and I'm sure you've got some questions. Just pop them in the chat. I'm aware of time sort of a ticking. It's hard not to blab on. And I think I took up more time than I should have done. But so Christina, over to you. Tell everybody kind of what it was like for you. Oh, you're on mute, Christina.
Sorry, I muted myself. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I was thinking, actually, it was so interesting listening to Rebecca and Jenny, and I was thinking back to something that stood out for me when I first did the program is the reason that I chose to do the program actually was because I had a sense that it would open up some new avenues of work for me, if I'm honest. That's what I had a real sense that it was required and needed. But I approached, that was my initial approach. And I think what stood out for me is really within about the first 1 or 2 modules, I remember quite a few times sitting in the program thinking, oh, and really realizing, oh, I really need to, this really affects me. And I'm all over this. I could see so many patterns of my behavior in the past and my resilience levels in the past, and suddenly how I'd operated and why I'd operated in the way that I did. So so maybe I'll say a little bit more about that when I finish, but I think it just stood out for me as you were talking, particularly as Rebecca was talking, as I went through the program, what happened with me, and it was really, really helpful actually. But what do? I've been a coach now for about 15 years, and for the past 10, I decided, having worked in the private sector for about 5 years, that I wanted to work within the charity sector. I wanted to work with organizations who were doing something positive in the world. And so I started working with the charitable sector in about 2010. And then, interestingly enough, I come from I had a background in sales and marketing. And I ended up doing some training programs. And to cut a very long story short, I've ended up working with fundraising teams, actually doing lots of support for helping fundraising teams raise income. And they're some of the largest charities in the UK. So people like CRUK and Save the Children and WWF, really they really are huge machines for generating change in the world, but also they raise millions and millions of pounds every year. So there's a huge amount of pressure on those fundraising teams specifically to continuously be really generating activity, very externally focused. They're all target driven. So it's quite a hard environment to work in. So when I started thinking about today's program, I thought, how will I describe the impact that this has sort of had on me? So I think really there's been 4 key areas of impact, really. The first one, I think, and I'll tell you a bit about how I've used it in my work, but the first one has been, I think the community has been fundamental. I think this is the only program I've done, and I'm obsessed with personal development, that I'm actually still on a monthly basis in touch with people that I've trained with and part of an ongoing community, which I think is really interesting. So I still link into the connect and learn. I always come away from those sessions feeling like I've actually charged my own battery to some degree. I often learn something new, which is really, really helpful. So the community piece has been really important to me. And recently I had to put a big proposal together for a new piece of work just on resilience. And I spoke to Jenny and she recommended a couple of other people who'd done something similar. And immediately 4 people contacted me and said, oh, I can help you with that. And I thought it was so helpful just to be able to talk to 3 or 4 people and say, this is what I'm trying to do. And I'm thinking of positioning in that way. Any thoughts? And I got some really helpful advice. So it's a community of people who really do this work because of the value it can add. And therefore they want each other to succeed, which was just really, really helpful. So not only do all of those sessions give me lots of new ideas, lots of new content, just a fresh perspective. So the community piece has been really, I think, really sort of integral to the whole piece. The other key part for me was the personal growth piece, because you all know, as a coach, I'm committed to my own growth. So I'm focused on that on a daily basis, and also just my general level of awareness in terms of what I can see and what I can't see. So that was why I think the program was such an eye-opener, in that I could very quickly see the times in my life when my resilience had been high, why it had been high, what I had been doing to maintain that level, and also why I'd experienced dips. and I could literally see those patterns over time. I'm also a mindfulness practitioner, and I've been a meditator for about 25 years. And I hadn't really realized until I did the program how much certain practices in my life had actually supported my resilience. I figured they had. That's why I did them. But what the program gave me is it gave me a huge amount of research that scientifically said these enablers, these actual practices will support your resilience. And suddenly I thought, oh, and it gave a real legitimacy to talking about those things with my clients. So I'm a lot more passionate about those enablers now. I love saying to people, you can change this. You can actually, there are things that you can do. It's proven that if you put effort into these areas of your life, it will affect your level of resilience. So I love telling people that. So yeah, I think the personal growth aspect was really key. And then it's just helped me enormously as a coach. So, and for those of you who coach, you'll know how many times I've sat with people in coaching sessions who really want to do something at work and they're absolutely exhausted, or they're running so fast with so much on their plate that you immediately sit back and think, this is just this level of energy or this level of approach is just probably, there's something wrong here with capacity versus demand. And you know it intuitively, but I just didn't have the language for it before. And now I can really, not in a sort of overly satisfied way, but now I can say, can I share something with you? I really think we need to talk about resilience and capacity, and I really want you to achieve this goal. I really want us to talk about how you put yourself into a state where you actually can. So it's given me this wonderful sort of font of, really well-researched material that I don't have to prove. It's wonderful. I don't have to say it's not mine. It's not any sort of great idea I've come up with. This has been researched. This is proven. Here are some things that you can actually do that will affect how you feel, and not just at work. It actually affects how you feel in your personal life, which is probably as important, if not more important. So the whole thing, I think, has really added huge value to my coaching. So whenever I take on a new client now, I always talk about the fact that I'm a resilience coach, and that affects everything that I do. And then lastly, it's affected my clients and the work that I can go for. So now whenever I talk to a new client, I always talk about the fact that I do resilience coaching and training. And in the last couple of years, I've run, I think, 2 big programs for charity, large teams, 20, 30 people. And I've taken them through the whole sort of resilience piece, all of the models that Jenny showed you earlier on. And it's had an enormous impact on the way that they work. And really interestingly enough, one of the directors at one of the charities said to me a couple of weeks ago, you know what's really helpful is we have a language now that we use with each other. And so we can communicate how we feel and how we're feeling about capacity, using the language that we all agree with. And it's just so helpful. And I met one of the directors said to me the other day, I'd really pushed myself for a couple of days, Christina. So I took myself home and I went to bed early and I had a lovely hot bath and I did all those lovely things that I knew I needed to do. So it's just given me, I guess, some real opportunities around new work. And then it's, of course, it's supported me on a personal level too, in an enormous way. So I'm going to pause there because I feel like I've said enough. So I'll pause and pass back to Jenny.
I'm just aware of how much we're really, showing up as absolute fans of it, and quite transformative. So, and I'm not sorry for that. It's absolutely, really true. So, we are just coming to the end. Thank you so much, Rebecca, Christina, for coming in on this. And then, we've got a couple of questions already. Rachel, so next year will be our 10th year. I'm so excited about that, and we have on average taken somewhere between sort of 12 to 15 practitioners each year. We've also done internal programmes, so specifically commissioned in order to suit timeline. So we've done that in the private sector, in banking. We've done it quite a bit in the public sector, particularly in NHS and in local government. And then there are people who retire, you know, and stop. So I actually don't know the numbers, but it's going to be between 150 to 200 in that last little while. That if that helps. Clear. Do you want to take this one, Rebecca? Here's a question.
Yes. No is the short answer. So no, many of the people that come into the program work with individual clients, because actually team coaching is, you know, kind of deeper training again. So I think most people are individual, you know, one-to-one coaches, and then they either have a sort of team coaching capability alongside their one-to-one work. So absolutely. And then, you know, as Jenny just said, a third of our community practice are internal L&D, OD professionals. So there's a real mix within it.
And Claire, you know, there's lots to be done further in taking the team resilience research and activating that more precisely. So in the current accreditation programme, we're asking you to do one-to-one in a significant way, and also for ethical reasons and group dynamics, etc., to understand group versus team. And it's an additional too. So you know, so it's not deep team systemic. It is systemic work, but it's not sort of team. It's not a, you know, currently I would describe it as a normal coaching program rather than a team coaching program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if anybody's got any questions about how this might kind of fit within their own organisation or their own work, then, you know, I often have kind of quite a few calls in the run up to the programme. So, you know, Jenny can just put us in touch and I can talk you through that, because we've had people on the programme this year who have managed to get it as part of the strategic vision for the CEO, and quite a big organisation is now scaling it up within their organisation, people that are using it in one-to-one. So yeah, nice to see you, Claire. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Claire. Any more questions that you have, things that might have come up for you? How are you feeling about it? Where's your sense of curiosity or sort of thoughts for yourself in your own practice?
I think the model itself is a much needed one, isn't it? You know, even, you know, so I'm L&D in third sector background, and just that whole making sure that our people are well. I mean, I think across all sectors, but my focus is third sector. So, so yeah, so it sounds amazing.
Cool.
Exciting.
Christina, Barbara, Marcelo, any questions from you guys? Any thoughts? Just as we're coming to the top of the hour.
Just in terms of reaction, very excited about all that I've heard today.
Lovely. That's great, Barbara. Thank you.
Sounds great. I'm just trying to figure out how it would fit with my role and how I could, you know, get the funding and all the rest of it. So, yeah, I'll need to, yeah.
We have 2 places that we deliberately give for every year for the public sector stroke charity sector at 50%, and it's on a first come first served basis, you know. So, and we have a number of inquiries around it. So, you know, just flagging.
Okay.
If we can do any more at the back end, you know, if all the places, if we've got 1 or 2 more spaces, we also do it for the same. But you know, we know that we assign 2 of the possible places.
Okay.
So yeah, get in touch if you need any further info.
Yeah, I might do, and I might need yeah, a bit of a conversation around, yeah, where would I find these clients from? You know,
we can have a conversation about that.
Right.
So yeah, just get my details from Jenny and we'll
okay. Right,
yeah,
sure.
we can have a conversation about that.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks.
Marcelo, are you thinking about it for yourself?
I'm a huge fan of the program, so it's really cool just to see like in action. So yeah, just excited. Let's see.
Yeah, cool. Well, I mean, you know, I hope that's been useful for you. Thank you so much for you know, attending and coming in. For anyone who's watching the recording, we know that you couldn't make it in today, and feel free to get in touch. We'll put out the recording, and we'll include Rebecca and my own details, so that you can ask any questions and get in touch. So we hope that some of you will be joining us in our 10th anniversary year. We'll have some kind of party or whatever. So it's going to be fun. So yeah, it's really, really nice. So thank you so much. May your resilience be with you. And we look forward to being in touch. So thank you.
Great to see you all.